that meant if this was somehow made got away from them, it might cause dire consequences, but not as bad as top secret. Confidential was during daily operations, keep your radio call signs and all this other stuff. Keeps them to yourself, more or less. And then there was a restricted. So that followed more or less the British system. We copied, like I say, the intelligence during World War II was, except for the Navy, who had already been doing this for years, it was made up as they went along.
So they tried to use the British model just because it was already established before the DOD.
British have other things, though. We're not as complicated as the British. They had, discreet secrets and this secret and that secret. They got all kinds of things that we don't use. We also had eyes only. It usually meant one person's eyes.
Right. I used that myself.
For like General Eisenhower's eyes only. Of course, that didn't mean that Eisenhower was the only one that could see it. He probably decided who on his staff needed to see it. But
mine always went to the head dude in charge, so to speak. So I had to put eyes only definition. Now, today we have code words that are in the secure system. And after eyes only, secure in the net.
They had other things, stuff dealing with nuclear weapons and other things, but that's basically the whole classification system. So.
Okay. So back to Carl Spaatz, World War II. Yeah. Carl Spaatz, Toohey, World War II general.
And he became commander of the Army Air Forces in 1946 after Arnold left. Arnold retired.
Why do we hear so much about Curtis LeMay in the UFO business? Why does he get so much credit?
Because
he was in the Pacific Theater?
UFO business. He's important in the UFO business. Well, he was having Foo Fighters over there. Now, if you go to Francis Ridge's site, one of the commanders asked General LeMay, he says, what can you tell me about these Foo Fighters? And since he worked for LeMay figured he didn't need to know. So he told him, I don't know anything about that. And so Fran's got that on his site that, LeMay didn't know anything. LeMay didn't think that his commander needed to know, but LeMay was writing to General Norstad about Foo Fighters. So it's not what you tell one person and what you tell your peer or your higher is different.
Well, nowadays the top secret has to be read into. I don't know what it was back then, but now,
they didn't
like
have
Trump's conversations.
System back then. We don't have this complicated. We don't have this complicated system back then. So so Spaatz gets a report from General McDonald. Now, by this time, Stewart's gone, so Vandenberg is Director of Central Intelligence. And he gathers all the data that he has, and he sends a report to Truman. Actually, he sends two reports to Truman about the CIA. One of his
did they
sources,
have top secret? They used top secret back then?
I just said that. Yeah, they did have top secret.
But they didn't have code word. They didn't have code words. Okay.
It became more complicated after the Second World War.
Okay,
so Vandenberg sends information that he got, and one of the places he got information was from Captain Roscoe Hillenkotter in Paris. Captain Hillenkotter gets a report that the French government put together on ghost rockets. And so Vandenberg gathers all this information and sends it to the president, to the White House. 2 reports, as a matter of fact. He sends 2 reports to the White House on this. The generals, almost all the generals in the Pentagon get these reports. They're top secret, but they also all get them because top secret messages that come in, on the back of the message, it's stamped with each general that saw them. The names of the general are hand stamped on the back, so Spats.
So they know who had saw them.
Yeah.
Was that normal?
Yeah,
Or that's something they started? That was normal back then?
That was normal back then. Okay, so like I say, the ghost rockets kind of disappear and go out of fashion now. It's not that we didn't have UFO sightings at this time. Things that look like UFOs, even in Sweden. We had one report of 3 triangular objects flying over these homes, and the people saying their electricity was dead and their electric clock stopped, and they reported to the police. And the Swedish police went ahead and reported it to the defense agency there. And so it was in the... They found this report in the summertime in Sweden. So in the United
right here
States,
at Ghost Rockets. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
In Waterloo, Iowa, this couple is looking out the back of their house, and over the alleyway, here's this low-level object that's about 6 feet. And it's hovering over there, and then it slowly goes away, and that's reported in the newspapers. And the Iowa newspaper says we have ghost rockets here. So there's other. It wasn't completely just Northern Europe and Sweden. These things are being seen all over the place, but not as the Swedish stuff is the main stuff. Now, while this is going on, something else is happening. Like I said, the Air Force is still part of the Army, so the assistant secretary of the Army for air will become the secretary of the Air Force, Stuart Symington, and will later become a congressman or a senator. He'll become a senator. But he's the secretary of the Army Air Force for air. And he writes to General LeMay, and he's talking about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And he asked about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He says, what happens at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base if in the middle of a budget cycle we need a new project? How do we do that? And LeMay says, well, it's not really a worry. If we need a new project and it's in the middle of the budget cycle, and the budget cycle runs, 12 months.
Sorry. I turned that off. It turned itself back on.
Right.
That was the phone. I apologize.
So LeMay tells Symington that if we need a project, the general at Air Materiel Command can, on his own authority, start a new project. He doesn't have to get a authorization from me or anybody else. LeMay says he can just start a project if he needs to. But by the time by the time the next budget cycle comes along,
money is a different thing.
Yeah, he says by the time the next budget cycle comes along, he has to get permission to continue this project, or he has to close it. So that makes, so this is going to be important later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other person that I talked about was Bernard Baruch, who joined the Navy intelligence before the war started, and he devised a system for reporting enemy sightings. It's called SERIES, Communications Instructions for Reporting enemy sightings. And after the war was over, he went to the Pentagon to explain his proposal that the reporting system continue on even after the war is over in the civilian after the war is over, and the Pentagon looked at that and said, "This is a good idea. It worked. Your reporting system worked real well during the Second World War, and we need to keep this in peacetime." But they didn't actually order it implemented. Of course, Bernard Baruch, being well connected politically, didn't like that. Even though he's only a commander at the time, he knows all these high muckamucks in the military and in the government. So he lets that sit for about a year. But in 1946, he starts going to see people and saying, "Hey, this thing was supposed to be implemented, but it wasn't. We need these reports implemented, and airline pilots and all these other people need to start reporting things that might be a threat to the America." Now, nothing about flying, nothing about flying objects is talked about, but it's just anything that might need to be reported. So he goes and sees the Secretary of the Navy and a number of admirals, but and they more or less agree with him, but they, nobody's really pushing this. 1947 comes. Early in 47, the British have a strange radar incident where they're chasing planes across Britain. They're chasing unidentified planes across England, and it's called Operation Charlie. And they're really concerned about this. They're getting radar, surface radar, and the aircraft that are chasing these things, they can't catch them. And there's random sightings of things before Kenneth Arnold. There's